The film opens up. In December 1941, writer Bob Leckie meets his neighbor Vera Keller at a church and tells her that he has joined the Marines and promises to write to her. In another place, experienced Sergeant John Basilone hears a speech from Lieutenant Colonel Chesty Puller outlining their goals in the Pacific and explaining that fighting Hitler is not their job. He brings his friends and fellow Marines Manny Rodriguez and J.P. Morgan to his big Italian family's home for Christmas, and his family wishes them good luck in the war. Leckie's father takes him to the train station and finds it hard to say goodbye. In Alabama, Eugene Sledge is upset to find out from his doctor father that he has a heart condition, which means he can't join up. He meets his best friend Sidney Phillips, who is about to leave, and says goodbye to him. The new Marines set off on ships towards Guadalcanal, and they look to Professor Leckie to tell them what to expect. Their confidence turns to fear as they approach the beach, but they are surprised to find only other bored Marines on the island. They eat coconuts and then go into the jungle, looking for the enemy, and come across several mutilated American bodies. A Marine is accidentally killed by friendly fire at night, and the men realize that the Japanese are probably watching them. Leckie and Lou Chuckler Jurgens happily watch the ships shooting at each other from a distance, but in the morning they are all shocked to find that their navy has left after a defeat, taking their supplies and food with them. They get involved in a heavy firefight across a river at night, and by morning they find that it was a real turkey shoot, with hundreds of Japanese soldiers dead. One badly injured enemy soldier kills 2 Marines with a grenade, and some of the others entertain themselves by shooting at a lone surviving enemy soldier for fun, but Leckie sternly stops the cruel game. Chuckler is promoted to corporal, and Leckie looks through the Japanese soldier's personal things, writing to Vera that he has seen things sobering to the soul on the small island. Later, Chesty, Basilone, and the others arrive as backup, and although the Marines greet each other with jokes, the new men notice that their comrades look like they have been through the ringer. Leckie and the others read letters from home out loud to each other, with Sledge writing to Phillips about how he is lucky to be serving his country and wishing him a happy 18th birthday. The scene shifts. In October 1942, Basilone struggles to maintain order and sanity as more of his men are killed, while elsewhere, Leckie and his friends attempt to find edible rations. Tempers flare as food runs low, and Chesty provides updates on their duties. The army shows up, and the Marines take advantage of their ignorance of the enemy's attack style to raid their belongings. Leckie snags a number of items for himself and his friends, though earns an unfortunate new nickname when he gorges himself on canned peaches. At night, the jungle is strafed yet again, and Basilone and Rodriguez are disturbed when several men are killed in a direct hit to their foxhole. Chesty informs the men that they will be alone and forced to fight in the jungle as guerrillas if they do not prevent the Japanese from retaking the island's airfield, and Lieutenant Corrigan tells Leckie and the others to set up along the tree line, though he admits that they have far too few men. Sergeant Briggs calls Chesty to warn him of an enemy approach, and sure enough, Basilone and the others soon come under heavy fire. Basilone mans a machine gun and fires continuously, assisting Morgan in carrying on despite a bad burn to his hand from the metal. He tangles with several enemy soldiers up close and personal, and even runs right out to the enemy line to clear away a heap of bodies to provide a clearer line of fire and find more ammunition. In the morning, Basilone seems unconcerned about his third-degree burns and about Chesty's comment that he intends to put him in for a medal for his heroic actions, distracted by Rodriguez's unknown whereabouts. Eventually, he finds him dead in the jungle, and he and Morgan mourn the loss of their friend. Back in Mobile, Sledge tells his father that he intends to enlist regardless of his heart murmur, though Dr. Sledge tells him that he is more fearful of the psychological damage that the war will take on him, having cared for traumatized soldiers after WWI. Leckie works on a poem about their experience, and Corrigan happily tells the men that they are finally leaving Guadalcanal. Basilone sadly ponders his and the others' seemingly random mortality, deciding that, if it happens, it happens. Leckie, Chuckler, Hoosier, and Runner all aboard the transport ship and are stunned to hear from the cook that their efforts on the island have not gone unnoticed and that they are heroes back home. In January 1943, the Marines arrived in Melbourne and are greeted by cheering crowds grateful for their assistance in protecting Australia. They set up camp in a stadium, but everyone soon goes AWOL and heads out into the city to enjoy themselves. Basilone and Morgan toast to Rodriguez's memory and get into a scrap with some locals who are not pleased to see the cowboy Yanks, and a drunken Leckie impresses his friends when he wins over a girl Stella after pursuing her onto a trolley. Everyone is severely hungover in the morning, and Chesty lectures Basilone about his behavior and shocks him by telling him that he is to receive the Medal of Honor for his bravery on Guadalcanal. Phillips attempts to romance a young lady, Gwen, who has a very strict grandfather, and Basilone and Morgan continue fraternizing with the local women. They are nearly busted for being AWOL, and Basilone considers stealing an MP's Jeep to escape, but Morgan reminds him that he needs to behave more honorably now. Basilone receives his Medal of Honor in an official ceremony, and Lecky visits Stella at home and joins her Greek immigrant parents for dinner, where he impresses them with knowledge of their country's history. He tells them about being the youngest child in a large and unhappy family, and when they learn that he is bunking at the stadium, they invite him to stay in their home instead. Stella visits Lecky late at night, and they make love, afterwards discussing their respective families' troubles, including the deaths of their brothers. Elsewhere, Basilone is upset to learn that he is soon to be sent home to use his heroic tale to sell war bonds. Lecky continues bonding with Stella and her family, and when they hear that a family friend has been killed in action, Lecky accompanies them to pay his respects. He talks with Stella's mother late at night about religion and faith, and she tells him that she is praying that he returns safely to them. The Marines are then put on a train and taken out of Melbourne, and Lecky rebukes his friends for shooting at cows along the way, saying that they are some farmer's livelihood. They are then ordered to march several days back into the city as training, and Lecky and Hoosier both suffer from severe blisters along the way. Lecky makes it back to Stella's home and is stunned when she rebuffs him, saying that they have no future together and that it will hurt her entire family if he is killed in the war. He drowns his sorrows at a bar and heads back to the stadium, and when Chuckler asks him to briefly cover his watch, he gets into an argument with Lieutenant Corrigan and gets them both thrown in the brig. Phillips spends more time with Gwen, but then learns that he is soon to ship out, and they sneak away from her family and spend one final afternoon together in a hotel room. Corrigan reassigns Lecky to the battalion intelligence section, and Morgan bids farewell to Basilone as he regretfully heads back to the States. The rest of the Marines board the transport ship and are given a warm send-off by the cheering crowd as they depart Australia. In December 1943, Private Sledge struggles with his Marine training as Lecky and the others celebrate Christmas aboard the transport ship as they head for Cape Gloucester. Despite being assigned to intelligence, Lecky joins the others on patrol and takes out 4 Japanese soldiers in the jungle. The Marines face another attack under a heavy rain, and Lecky is told to destroy the intelligence tent if they are overrun. In the morning, however, they realize that they greatly outnumbered the enemy. The Marines explore the Japanese camp, and Lecky finds a chest containing a pistol, among other things, and takes it for himself. They come across a Japanese soldier who is still alive, though barely, and Gibson slowly strangles him to death as his friends look on, alarmed. Everyone is frustrated as the terrible weather continues, and Lecky writes to Vera that they have not seen an enemy soldier for 2 weeks and are instead battling the island itself. Lecky is furious when Sergeant Larkin, claiming he needs it to store papers, steals his ill-gotten chest, and Lecky eventually steals it back and gets himself booted from intelligence detail. He is humiliated when Larkin points out that he has urinated on himself, and the doctor diagnoses him with enuresis, though tells him that there is little to be done about it. Later, in May 1944, the Marines depart for Pavuvu, and Runner comes down with malaria as Lecky vents his frustration in letters to Vera. The commanding officers conduct a lottery, and a few randomly chosen men are allowed to go home, and when Lecky continues suffering the effects of enuresis, the doctor sends him to a hospital on Banica. He realizes that he is being held with a number of psych patients, including Captain Midnight, who wanders the wards at night talking to himself. Dr. Grant admits that he assumed that Lecky was faking in order to escape the hardships of Marine life, telling him that most of the men there are just worn out. Lecky at first dismisses the doctor's attempts to assess his mental health, but then confesses that Guadalcanal and Cape Gloucester took a profound toll on him as well. Late at night, Captain Midnight becomes agitated and is sedated, and Lecky is shocked to see his friend Gibson in an isolated cell as well. The orderly tells him that Gibson tried to kill himself after a desperate escape attempt, and Lecky tells Grant that he wants to leave the comfortable hospital and get back to his friends before they ship out, even offering to bribe him with the Japanese pistol. Grant agrees to release him, and Lecky bids farewell to Gibson, who talks about his own traumatic experiences before wishing Lecky a quick and easy death rather than prolonged suffering. In the States, Basilone struggles with his new celebrity status as he reminds the American people to back the attack alongside starlet Virginia Gray. After a sexual encounter, she tells him that he has no idea what awaits him. His brother George visits him before shipping out and asks him just how frightening it was on Guadalcanal, and Basilone urges him not to try to prove anything by acting rashly while in battle. battle. In June 1944, Sledge and fellow Private Bill Layden landed on Pavuvu and received a less than warm welcome from their fellow K Company members, including Corporal Bergen and Privates Shelton, called Snafu, and Delo. Delo shows them around the camp, pointing out the compassionate Captain Akak Haldane, while elsewhere Lecky returns from his stay in the hospital and greets his friends with early Christmas presents. Phillips is elated to spot his old friend Sledge, and an amused Haldane witnesses their reunion. Later, several of the new recruits are assigned to scrub out oil drums, and Snafu watches them smugly. Sledge and Phillips talk privately on the beach, and when Sledge asks for the truth about the battlefield, Phillips tells him about Gwen and explains that war is the brutal polar opposite of what they shared. At night, the Marines enjoy a screening of For Whom the Bell Tolls, starring the glamorous Ingrid Bergman. The next day, however, Sledge is upset to find that Phillips has shipped out without him. He visits Lecky's makeshift library, briefly discussing the other war in Europe, where Sledge's brother is fighting. Lecky observes that Sledge is a believer, and they have a philosophical debate about free will and predestination, wondering about God's role in the war, with Lecky concluding that he believes in ammunition. In September, the Marines head for Peleliu and find themselves on the chaotic beach, taking heavy fire and enduring many casualties. Sledge tries to master his fear as Lecky mans the machine gun, and Hoosier is shot in the leg and appears close to death as Lecky frantically tries to aid him. Sledge and Snafu operate the mortar and try to take out several Japanese tanks, though they are soon forced to retreat. Lecky updates Runner about Hoosier, and Sledge's company settles in for the night in a safe area. Snafu shows him kindness by trading rations, but Sledge is disturbed when he casually digs the gold fillings out of a nearby Japanese corpse. At night, they watch the battle continuing on the airfield, and Private Oswalt compares the experience of battle to the Grand Canyon as something that must be seen in person to be truly believed. Sledge reflects that they must cross the dangerous exposed airfield on the following day. In September 1944, Phillips visits Sledge's parents in Mobile and assures them that he is not worried about their son, explaining that he is serving alongside good men and away from the front. Temperatures soar on Peleliu as the men grow desperate for water. A small pond is soon found, but is then discovered to have been deliberately contaminated. Haldane tells his company that they must cross the airfield in order to get into the hills, reminding them not to stop for anything. The Marines run across the field under heavy fire, losing many men along the way. Runner is hit in the arm, and Lecky promises him that he will find a corpsman, though he himself is badly injured in the attempt. Oswalt is killed, and Sledge assists Snafu when he is knocked down by a blast. Haldane maintains order of his men, and Sledge fires several mortar rounds at a nearby building from which the enemy is firing. K Company reconvenes to assess their losses and count their ammunition, and when a tank rolls by, the men are impressed when Haldane and his first lieutenant, Hillbilly Jones, force it to stop and take on their wounded. Lecky is transferred to a hospital ship, and as night falls, Sledge turns to his Bible. While on his watch, Private Daniels begins to break down and starts counting Japanese soldiers in a panic, and Haldane kindly allows him to assist with inventory duty instead. Sledge admits that he was terrified out on the airfield, and Haldane explains that he tries to focus on the just cause of their war when dealing with fear and the deaths of his men. In the morning, they move out towards the hills, and Sledge and Snafu bond further. They come under fire again in the hills, and Haldane realizes that they cannot achieve their objectives and departs to meet with his superiors for different orders. K Company anxiously awaits Haldane's return, enjoying a rare moment of laughter at a joke from their gruff gunny. Late at night, one private suffers a nightmare, and the others frantically attempt to quiet him before he gives away their position. In desperation, another man hits him with a shovel and accidentally kills him, and in the morning, Sledge grimly states that it was better to lose one man than several. Runner, injured but alive, finds Lecky on the hospital ship, and Lecky swears that he tried to return to him on the battlefield. They fret about Hoosier and Chuckler's fates and head onto the deck for a bit of fresh air as they make their way towards home. Back on the island, Haldane returns with his new orders and tells K Company that they are to fall back. In October 1944, Sledge and the rest of K Company continue fighting for their lives on Peleliu, and the endless carnage begins to take its toll on everyone. Captain Haldane chats with Sledge, mentioning that his father works in one of the textile factories from which they get their uniforms and blankets. Later, another squad passes by K Company, and Sledge is stunned to recognize a grievously injured Chuckler on a stretcher. Back in the States, Basilone attends yet another congratulatory event, this time with the Shriners, and then unwinds at the driving range, though he is still haunted by memories of Guadalcanal and the deaths of his friends, and ends up hitting golf balls late into the night. On Peleliu, Sledge hears a disturbance late at night, and in the morning it is revealed that one of their number has been killed by another who mistook him for an enemy soldier. Gunny Haney lectures them fiercely about not leaving their foxholes at night without properly warning the others. Later, they come under fire while on patrol, and Sledge hears a group of Japanese soldiers in a nearby bunker. Bergen tells him that it was recently checked, but Sledge turns out to be right, and they aggressively attempt to clear it out with rifles and grenades. Lydon is injured when a grenade goes off close to his face, and Sledge kills 2 soldiers up close with his bayonet when they attack him. Other Marines assist in emptying the bunker with a flamethrower, and Sledge is visibly traumatized by the experience. That night, Haldane assures Sledge that Lydon is doing well, telling him that he can't dwell on any of it. Sledge and Snafu serve as stretcher bearers during the next day's battle, struggling to carry the wounded over the rocky terrain. Despite their efforts, First Lieutenant Jones is killed, and Haldane is saddened by the loss of his friend. Deloe observes that even the tough gunny is starting to crack, declaring that he no longer cares if he himself dies as long as it is quick, and he breaks down in tears as Sledge comforts him. In the morning, the men enjoy a rare moment of levity after Deloe encounters an enemy soldier while answering a call of nature, but they are then devastated when Bergen tells them that Haldane has been killed by a sniper. His body is carried by on a stretcher, covered by one of his father's blankets. They are soon forced to move on, and Sledge is repulsed to see Snafu passing time by tossing pebbles into a Japanese corpse's open skull. He himself starts to remove another corpse's gold fillings, as Snafu had done, but Snafu urges him not to because of the bad germs, clearly not wanting the compassionate Sledge to lose himself. Eventually, they board a transport ship and land on Pavuvu, where they are greeted by pretty girls serving lemonade. Sledge and Snafu stare blankly, unable to comprehend something so normal and human. Later, he and the others go for a swim off the beach, where he and Phillips once conversed. The scene shifts on Pavuvu. Sledge is saddened to find one of Captain Haldane's books in the trash and keeps it for himself. Snafu frets that he is dying of hepatitis, and Deloe is upset when he is transferred to another company. In America, Basilone and his brothers read from a script on the radio, urging listeners to support the war effort. During a family dinner, Basilone admits that he does not want to be famous, and eventually visits Lieutenant General Vandegrift and tells him that he is sick of desk work and wants to be sent back to train new recruits. He arrives at Camp Pendleton and keeps himself fit as he waits for the new privates, and though only 2 arrive at first, he carries on and trains Evanson and Tatum strictly, reminding them that their errors could lead to their friends' deaths, as well as their own. Later, Basilone spots the beautiful Lena Riggi in the dining hall, but unlike her friends, she does not seem starstruck to see him, reminding him that she too is a sergeant. He tries to impress her by using his celebrity to get them a dinner table at the fancy Biltmore Hotel, but she firmly tells him that she is aware of his womanizing ways and does not intend to fall for his tricks. His captain reminds him that his enlistment is soon up, and he finds Lena again and asks her out properly. She turns him down for dinner, but challenges him to an early morning breakfast in the mess hall, and he accepts. He awakens his privates at dawn for a run, and when one man complains that he wants to slap a Jap, Basilone upbraids them angrily for underestimating their enemy. Lena makes breakfast for him, noting that he is a pampered Italian mama's boy, and they bond as they share personal stories about their war experience so far. Basilone continues training his men, giving them tips on carrying the hot, heavy guns without injury, and his relationship with Lena deepens as they spend a day at the beach. The commanding officer tells the new Marines that they will soon be shipping out, and notes that Basilone will be joining them after all. He goes to Lena and admits that he re-enlisted, and knowing that they will soon be separated, the two decide to marry. After the ceremony in July 1944, they head to a private cottage for a brief honeymoon, where they discuss their plans for the future and hopes for children. On D-Day, however, Basilone finds himself on the chaotic beach of Iwo Jima, alongside Evanson, Tatum, and his other men. Once again, he leads his men efficiently, taking out a machine gunner and running through the trenches to set his squad up in a safe place. He assists another group pinned down by a tank, but on his way back to his men, he is hit by mortar shrapnel and collapses. He bleeds out slowly and dies in the dirt amongst many other Marines. Lena, a widow after only 7 months of marriage, mourns her husband as she sits on the beach. In May 1945, K Company struggles through the mud on Okinawa and encounters several Okinawan refugees, whom some Marines erroneously believe to be their enemies. Snafu swindles new Private Peck out of his new poncho and gives him his old damaged one, and Sledge nearly comes to blows with a defiant Japanese prisoner of the army, though Second Lieutenant Mack intervenes. They soon come under fire and flee from a tank, and Sledge assists Peck and Private Ham in using the mortar. At night, Peck shields himself from the heavy rain under a new poncho and uses Snafu's old one to cover the ammunition. Their mortar misfires because it is wet, and Mack orders them to retrieve more ammo from a nearby squad. On their way back, several Okinawan children are caught in the crossfire and killed, as is one of their own number. In the morning, Ham frets about the civilians and and their lack of safe passage, and though Layden sympathizes with the difficulty of seeing one's first death, Snafu tells him that he must get mean if he is to survive. The others make fun of Peck upon discovering his lies about his pretty wife and about being drafted, and they suddenly move out upon hearing that the Japanese are retreating. Bergen summons Sledge, Snafu, and a frightened Ham up the hill, and they encounter more civilians fleeing the violence. A terrified Okinawan attempts to hand her baby to the flustered Marines, and they realize too late that she has been booby-trapped with an explosive. The situation worsens as they endure accidental shelling from their own side, with Sledge ranting that no one cares about their safety. The next day, the men read letters from home, and Snafu shows his compassionate side when Sledge mentions that his dog died. Ham learns of more kamikaze attacks and wonders why the enemy refuses to surrender, but Snafu cites their duty to God. Peck and Layden begin to fight, but Bergen breaks it up, and Layden is injured moments later by a shell, and Sledge has to be held back from running to his friend. During yet another rainy night, Ham admits that he thought it would be different, to which Sledge responds coldly. The men begin to doubt that they will ever leave the hellish island, and Sledge is horrified when he slips and tumbles into a rotting corpse. Mac orders him to fire rounds at a nearby farmhouse, and when a number of Japanese soldiers run towards them, they fire on them with rifles, with Sledge continuing to shoot in defiance of Mac's orders, angrily declaring that killing enemy soldiers is all that matters. Sledge and Snafu argue bitterly at night when Snafu gripes about the grim conditions and their lack of men, and Ham is killed when he tries to prevent a frenzied Peck from giving away their position. As they continue moving through the hills and killing enemy soldiers, Snafu and Sledge discover a living baby amongst the dead in a house possibly hit by one of their own mortars. Sledge then finds an old Okinawan woman dying slowly from her wounds, and though she wordlessly asks him to shoot her, he cannot bring himself to do so and instead comforts her as she dies. Minutes later, he is upset when a few other Marines callously gun down an Okinawan youth, assuming that he is a Jap. Later, the men enjoy a rare calm moment by the beach, and Bergen notices that Sledge still has Gunny Haney's lighter and mentions that Layden made it back home alive. As they move out, Mac tells them that the Americans used some kind of new bomb on another Japanese city with profound results. On August 15, 1945, at a veterans hospital on Long Island, the staff and patients, including Lecky, are ecstatic to learn that the Japanese have surrendered and that the war is finally over. Sledge, Snafu, Bergen, and the others celebrate VJ Day on Okinawa, wondering what the future holds for them as Lecky heads for home and has an awkward reunion with his parents. 6 months later, having stayed behind to help clean up, the members of K Company board a train and head for their respective hometowns. Bergen surprises the others by announcing that he intends to marry Florence, whom he met in Australia, though Sledge states that he himself has no plans for a job or a wife. Elsewhere, Lena finally meets the Basiloni family and gives John's parents his Medal of Honor. She admits that he never signed the insurance papers that would provide her with $10,000, but states that she does not care and grieves with her husband's relatives. The train stops in Texas, and Bergen gets off and reunites with his father and brother, with Snafu shyly thanking his sergeant for protecting them. Lecky strolls into his old newspaper office and confidently asks for his job back, though at home, he is nervous as he watches Vera through the window, and his mother notes that she is seeing someone. The train stops in New Orleans, and Snafu hesitates before deciding not to awaken a peacefully sleeping Sledge to say goodbye as he departs. Lecky dons his dress blues and finally visits the Kellers' home. Vera's date, an army man who missed the whole show, is annoyed when Vera expresses interest in Lecky and leaves, and Lecky and Vera go out to dinner. He admits that he wrote her many letters during the war, though opted not to send them as he believed that he would not make it back, and they agree that the date is a fresh start for them. Sledge arrives in Mobile, and Phillips greets him at the station, revealing on the drive home that he is soon to be married and wants Sledge as his best man. Sledge reunites with his parents and enjoys a family dinner, though he later suffers nightmares about the war. His brother Edward notes that he too has bad dreams and keeps his wife awake. Surprised to learn that Eugene did not date any women during the war, he assures him that the local girls will appreciate a fighting man, though Sledge declares that he will never wear a uniform again. Later, Sledge attempts to sign up for classes at Alabama Polytechnic, but realizes that he gained no skills other than killing during the war. He attends a local dance, though Phillips finds him sitting alone outside, and Sledge asks him why they returned home safely when so many of their friends did not. Phillips reassures him and says that with time he will forget some things. Vera joins the Leckys for dinner as they debate about current events and the growing popularity of television, and Mrs. Lecky observes the two holding hands during grace. Sledge accompanies his father on on a dove hunt, but breaks down as he realizes that he has experienced too much violence, and his father comforts him. Mrs. Sledge worries that her son is growing idle after he brushes off a job opportunity, but Dr. Sledge defends him, saying that he has been through a great ordeal. Later, he strolls through a flowery field, slowly regaining a sense of peace. The program concludes with notes about the characters' real-life counterparts and their lives after the war, revealing that Sledge eventually used his notes to write a memoir, With the Old Breed, at Peleliu and Okinawa, and died in 2001. Leckie married Vera and went on to write close to 40 books, including Helmet for My Pillow, about his experiences in the war, and also died in 2001. John Basilone posthumously received the Navy Cross and the Purple Heart, and Lena never remarried. Snafu did not speak to his fellow Marines for decades until reading Sledge's book, and Sledge eventually served as a pallbearer at his old friend's funeral. Bergen married Florence after all, and remained in Texas, and Phillips and Sledge remained close friends for the rest of their lives. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.